Hi guys, welcome to another episode of our podcast. And today my guest is Assad Quraishi. Assad is a CEO at Haunted Castle Gaming Inc. Welcome to the call, Assad. Thank you so much for time today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so if you tell us a little bit about Castle Gaming Inc. What do you guys do and what is it all about?
So Haunted Castle Gaming, it's kind of just my childhood dream come true. My entire life have been a game designer. I've been making things for my friends to play since I was more or less 5 or 6. And then in my later years, I decided I wanted to use this as a tool to learn more about leadership, management, sales, and marketing. And the best product to sell is something you're super passionate about. So I started the company around a game that I've been working on for a long time. And then now I'm in the position to just lead the company, and I have teams that work on the game, work on the marketing and sales, and I work a lot more on the strategy. So the company itself, we sell Genesis Battle of the Champions. I'm wearing the shirt. I got the posters in the background. It's a tabletop collectible card game. So similar to things like the Pokemon trading card game, Magic the Gathering, or Yu-Gi-Oh! Those are our major competitors. And we're in that space. I personally love that space because it's all about playing games with your friends on the tabletop, kitchen table, and building those relationships again. So that's why we were in that space, and
very interesting.
That's what I love about it.
So in a world where everything is digital, everything is electronic, what made you think of this board game which is physical? Definitely there's the challenges, or what made you think of this, and what's the difference if you can just lay out that what digital versus the physical games?
So the big reason between staying in the physical space instead of going to the digital is I did my degree in computer science at University of Toronto. I have been a coder my entire life. My dad actually moved from India to Canada to study at University of Waterloo because they had the first computers available for undergrads. So he moved his entire life to become a computer scientist. I followed in the footsteps. And when I graduated, I was a software tester for 10 years. I loved it. But the thing is, as technology is growing, a lot of these human connections are starting to fade away. And I think everyone felt it even more during COVID, when all of a sudden our meetings went from being physically sitting in a room talking to each other to being on Zoom. Everyone started noticing more and more that being physically connected with each other matters a lot more than technology. So just growing up in that space, I knew that this trend was coming. And we saw that about 10 years ago with board game cafes. In Toronto, a very famous one, Snakes and Lattes, they just got a lot of popularity because the gaming industry goes in cycles like most industries. And the verge of board games into hobby games, that started happening, and people wanted to play in the physical space. So I think as an industry, we are geared towards more people coming back to playing on tabletop again compared to playing digitally. And I think as a society, we want to show the next generation or even our current generation that we want to meet up in person. We want to play games together. I don't want to just sit in front of a screen anymore.
And I can relate to that. I definitely run that technology company, and my son always playing video games. He's 21. But every time we want to, have a family good quality time, we cannot, revert back to the board games.
Yes.
And I think that you're very correct on that. That we can spend so much time in front of screen, smaller screen or larger screen. But when you want a good quality time, family time, you go back to the board game, whereas physical, which is less distraction. You just focus on one game instead of digitally being distracted in many different directions, right?
Yeah, and everyone around the world appreciates the fact that tools like Zoom or Google Hangouts, all these video tools exist, especially right now. But all of us crave to go back to the day when we can have barbecues together or just go to Tim Hortons and have a coffee together. We're craving that connection. And like I said, I grew up in the tech space. I know how amazing technology is. I will never say technology needs to be cut out from the world. There's a lot of pros it adds, but there are cons, and we need to mitigate those.
Look, how about COVID? Let's talk about COVID. One of the things with COVID impact a lot of businesses, you disconnected from a social environment. Going to office, as much we love working from home, in a remote location because we don't have to travel. But other part, a lot of people are talking about they miss the social aspect of it. Where you see that your business, and did you see more demand, or what are your thoughts on that? That's what you guys provide, that the social aspect as a family to play the game together, right?
Like that's a big thing. And unfortunately, like our game, in the tabletop space, you have two kind of separating niches. And one of them is those family games like Monopoly, like the Game of Life, like Settlers of Catan, where the family can sit together and play. Then you got these hobby games, which are more about finding groups of like-minded people and competing against each other. So we found, especially as COVID hit, a lot of our player base couldn't play anymore because they don't play these games against their family. They want to play it against their peers. So that definitely impacted us in a very negative way. But at the same time, as a company, you need to learn to adapt. You need to learn to grow. And we took a very brave step at the beginning of COVID and actually started selling outside of the borders. We started selling to the US, especially as COVID measures were varying in different areas. We were able to find those areas of people who could still get together, still play together, and we started targeting them and bringing the game to them. So in some areas, we did see a decline of player base. In other areas, we saw a huge uptake. And then the one thing we really saw more than anything was that if you are good to your customers, if you are loyal to the people who helped you bring you to this point, then when you start struggling, they will be there for you. So we run a subscription Patreon program. So there's a website out there, patreon.com, where you can create subscriptions of members who can contribute to you on a monthly basis. And the moment COVID hit, a lot of our Patreon members reached out to us and said, I'm currently donating, $10 or $20 a month. I want to do more because I want to make sure your game survives post-COVID. And then we started seeing a huge uptake. I think nearly 400% uptake in our Patreon subscription because our loyal fans, we want you to survive. So even though they didn't have anyone to play with, they still made huge sacrifices and invested in us to make sure that our game survives the next everything that's happening right now.
So what drives that loyalty from a client base, Assad? Is that a value you guys provide? Is that how you take care of your clients? And so what's behind that, the driver for that kind of loyalty from your client base?
I think it's actually a very strong North American startup philosophy, which is an understanding that your company is nothing without your clients, that they come first, that you aren't in servitude to your board of directors or to your cash flow. You're in servitude to your clients. And we put a lot of attention towards whenever a new player would come on, a new store would sign up with us, we made sure to let them know that we're here to make their life better. We're here to give them the experience that they're looking for. And it was that dedication that when we needed to turn things around and say, we're struggling, can you support us? They're like, you've done so much for us. Let us give back to you. And so I found this, especially now I'm talking to a lot of retail stores or distributors around the world, because we, over the past few months, our expansion to US went so well that now we're expanding around the world. And I found that this is actually a very strong North American philosophy. And it was brought up by the agile mentality in the early 2000s and has really given startups an edge over a lot of our competitors. So it's something we provide. It's something that we just genuinely want to do as well.
Interesting. So if you can give us, I know it's a lot of details on the game. If you can give us just a 360 view, just an overview, a summary of it. what is this game? How it is played? What is, just this high level, how it's played and what's it made of, and how does this game work?
So I would like to think of it as like, have you seen the movie Gladiator?
Yeah.
And you got that moment where, you're the gladiator, you're fighting in the pits, you're fighting for your life.
Yeah.
It's that feeling, but imagine combining that with the Lord of the Rings of elves, archers, mages, big Balrogs. So that's kind of the feel of the game. It's you and your opponent trapped in a pit fight, and you're these epic mages, warriors, and you're bringing forth these creatures to fight alongside you, and you're going back and forth. And it's a game of survivability. You start the game off with all your resources, like you would in a normal pit fight. You come in full power, ready to brawl, and the game ends with you and your opponent just swinging punches at each other because you're out of resources and you're just fighting to survive.
So do you get a point? Are you collecting a points, or are you moving your character a little further in a board, or how does the whole thing work?
So the game itself plays on a 5x6 grid. And you have a character card. So on my side here, this is Rain. She's one of the characters in the game. So you play as this character. It's an avatar of you on the board. Each turn, you get to move around. You have your own health. And then your opponent has a health too. And you're just trying to drop your opponent's health down to 0. So every time you punch them, it might do 1 or 2 damage. Something like a giant bolt shot might hit for 4. Every card hits for a different amount. And you're just bringing your opponent's life down to 0.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's kind of like if you've seen like Pokemon or those other combat type of systems, it's that idea. It's just a back and forth fight that you're going through.
So where are these characters from? They are from Lord of the Rings, or are they from different movies, or where are all the characters? It's you designing all of them.
I started with this IP. It was a really cool concept of how do I create a story that can resonate, that can grow and be 3-dimensional. So I am one of my minors when I was in university was in linguistics, and I really loved history of linguistics. So I loved how the path that we traveled on as humans, that changed our language and created different politics and different philosophies. So I incorporated that same history into a world that I created called J-Lara. And I just started bringing forth all these characters that had a resonance to me and could drive the story forward. Now I have a team of story writers, so it's 4 of us, and we're crafting this world, 5 of us actually, and crafting this world, and we're talking about, okay, if this is happening, well, politically this would happen next, and we're drawing off of the references that we're seeing in our own political climate. So it gives us a lot of opportunities to create a very 3-dimensional world.
That's very creative. And that's a creative world. Somebody from a computer science background, it's a logical background, to come to creative side of things. That's a totally different world. How did you make the transition from that to Assad?
Oh, I had a very wild imagination as a kid. And I used to be able, I told my friends I used to be able to sit down and actually talk to these characters like they were right in front of me. So I had that one side of me that loved to play in this creative space. So I actually, when I was in high school, I was a lead in a drama club, and I did so many performances. That was a big focus. And I actually wanted to go to university for drama. My original intent was to go to U of T for drama and English as my double major. And my dad very actively convinced me that computer science would be a good
Indian families, that's where we go to.
But it made sense, right? Like if you're going to invest into your future, have a solid focus, but then you can minor in whatever you want, right? So I focused in computer science, minored in English, minored in linguistics, didn't actually take any drama courses in U of T, which was a bit of a shame. But I still got to write. I spent all my minor was about writing and reading very fantastical stories. So and it shows in the game. Like we have this very rich, very interesting storyline, which is very creative. But the cards themselves, I designed all the cards to follow object-based programming. So you have the card, which is an object, and then under it has 2 functions, and each function follows a particular format. And so a lot of times I have editors come in and they're like, your grammar doesn't follow proper English grammar. I'm like, that's fine. Don't worry about that. The coders out there will understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you got it. So you talk about the characters. So one of the things I saw recently, I don't follow that closely, but I know my son does. The Pokemon cards, when we're on a market value, they went higher or low. What is the behind these cards getting so expensive and then the price drop? Is it simply that the artwork on it, the creativity on it, or simply that there's not enough out there? What's behind those things?
So it's a very, very interesting market. The collectible card game space works. It has two components of it. There's the game and the collectability. And the collectability follows the same model as hockey cards, because that's where this entire genre of gaming came from. It was one person, Richard Garfield, back in, I think, 92. He pitched this idea of what happens if you bought cards in little packs like hockey cards, but after you got the cards, you played a very complex game with them. So it took the collectible aspect of the hockey cards and combined them with a very, very interesting, very strategical game. And that's where we're starting to see things change right now, because the game can't be played because of COVID, but the collectability is now skyrocketing. So I know about 10 years ago, the value of Magic the Gathering cards were climbing faster than the value of Bitcoin because of this collectability, because certain cards are now out of print. You can't find them anymore. There was only maybe, just say 10,000 of them printed. And of those 10,000, maybe only 100 of them survived in perfect condition. So finding a perfect condition one on the secondary market is very, very difficult. So it becomes that supply and demand. Then what happened with Pokemon was there was one particular YouTuber who, in his pursuit of finding particular Pokemon cards and creating buzz and nostalgia, he skyrocketed the value of all these cards on the secondary market. And that ended up, what we're looking at in our industry is this bubble around the secondary market. They've got cards that are now brand new, printed right off the press, going into the customer's hands, and it's already worth $4,000 for that card.
Wow.
And you can imagine how crazy this is as a publisher, because we're not spending that kind of money to get these cards printed. They're just worth that much on the secondary market. So the entire industry is weird, because it's a lot of, there are the players and then there's the investors. And there are people who are looking at the space purely as an investor perspective. And for that, I would reference someone. He has a YouTube channel called Alpha Investor. His day job is he's a Wall Street investor. And then in the evening, he makes these YouTube videos on how to invest into these collectible card games. So it's a very, very interesting kind of duality you're looking at games.
I see. You also mentioned a Bitcoin. I don't know how much digital currency you follow. Somebody recently bought art museum there with the 68 million. I don't know if you follow that. Is there room to, or is there transition from what you do in a physical world to convert that into digital world as well, or is it always going to stay physical and that's how the value going to stay?
Yeah. So there's definitely opportunities in that, and I know some of my competitors have looked at that. However, it starts blurring the line between, are you out there to make a good game and the secondary market is a secondary aspect of your game, or are you out there to create a collectible product which just so happens to be you can play a game with it?
I see.
And my company, we're very much focused on wanting to make a good game. So even though we've had people internally constantly bring up NFTs and how can we incorporate that into our company, I've pushed back saying, let's focus on making the game first. Let's focus on making a product that our loyalists who have helped us all through COVID and who have worked really, really hard to make sure that our company survives, let's reward them with the product that they're looking for. And then when we're more stable in the future, we can look at about incorporating these things, but let's not sacrifice our company's values and our core of who we are just to chase the latest trend.
So let's talk about business of the business side of things. So where you guys are and where you guys are heading to, and who how do you go after market? Is it only Canadian market? You mentioned that you're doing some work in the US as well. and how do who do you looking to talk to? Is it retailers or is it a wholesaler? How do you go about that business scaling?
Yeah, so I was very, very fortunate. I'm gonna take a few steps back. I'm gonna talk about how when I started the company, and I was looking for my first initial loan or grant, I was introduced to a company, and this is a Canadian government-run organization called Futurepreneur. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they work with young entrepreneurs, I think 33 or younger, and they'll help you not only secure your first loan, but they also help you connect you with a mentor. And my mentor is he's a really senior executive at Loblaws, and he made sure every step of the way my goal was about building a foundation. Everywhere I went, I made sure that whatever I was doing, I was building my foundation. I was understanding my company first before expanding a lot. So over the past few years, we've done nothing but build those foundations, build those relationships, understand the market, understand our competitors, understand our own core philosophy. And now we partnered with a company called Hit Point Sales, who is helping us expand internationally. And they got us not just reinforce our standings in Canada, but got us distribution within the US, Germany, and now we're working on getting distribution into Australia. And again, we're always carrying forth the philosophies we built in those early days. So a lot of cool steps, but if it wasn't for my mentor, I feel like we would have expanded too quickly and just deflated on ourselves because we couldn't support that large network. So that's a big thing that I remember when I started this, everyone was saying, okay, you got a great game. Let's sell it all across Canada as soon as possible. Get it in everyone's hands as soon as possible. I was like, no. I'm focusing on one store at a time. And then I was slowly growing it until I exceed my capacity. So it was very contrary to what the modern growth philosophy is. Get it on Kickstarter, get it on Instagram, get it on Facebook and YouTube, and gain giant popularity. I was like, no, start small and really focus and grow your niche space every step of the way.
So every time you make a decision, we're gonna go this way in a business or this way, there's always obstacles, there's always lessons learned, there's always challenges. What are the biggest challenges you faced going through this approach compared to other approach? I'm sure either way there would have been challenges, right? And if you talk about a couple of major ones you had to deal with, and you got over those challenges, and maybe somebody listening to this podcast, they can learn from it, and then they can avoid those challenges in the business.
I think one of the biggest things I had, and I still struggle with this today, is envy, right? When you look at your competitors and like, I'll never get there. I'll never be able to do that. And then you just want to forego all your strategy and just say, let's just do a gambit and see if we can grow massively. I have that almost every single day where I know there's this one game that came into a market 1 year after us and has eclipsed us in growth. And I'm just thinking to myself, why am I even doing this? If they came in later than us and have already surpassed us, what's the point of me even trying? Like, I must be doing something wrong. And it's like, no, everyone grows at their own rate. Everyone succeeds at their own rate. And the successes we have shouldn't diminish who we are as a company. The successes we have should reinforce us and shouldn't make those losses larger in our minds, right? So that envy, that thing really hurt us. The other thing is just the confidence to even try. I think a lot of industries, and I say that like ours is an exemption. It's not. I think every industry has this issue where when you go to start in it, you're going to have a million voices around you saying, don't even bother. Sorry, my alarm is going off. Where is my phone? I hid it so I wouldn't be distracted. Honestly, I can't see it. Oh, there it is. All right. Sorry.
No, sorry.
So In every industry, when I started this, I had so many people telling me, don't bother fighting in this space because your competitors have millions of dollars. They've been at it longer, and you're just one person. How can you compete against them? And I know people in the healthcare space and the grocery space and all these different industries who have those same voices around them.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that kind of really got me out of that was the support network I did have. My wife, my father, my in-laws, all the time being like, you can do this, you can do this. And then having really good friends who I remember one night messaging my friend being like, I think I'm done. And he's like, stay where you are, I'll be there in 30 minutes. And he came over, we went for a walk, and he was like, you can't give up. You can't give up. So having that support network before jumping into it was very good. And then they're the ones who've got me this far.
Mm-hmm. Was it intentionally that you built a support system before you started, or was it just happened to be that helping you to move forward? Because that's so critical what you just mentioned. That I don't think any business owner out there in this time and age who's trying to build a business is built without that support system. Either you have it before you start, or in the middle of that you have to build it. But you need that support system, right? So without that, you can't even get there, and you can't even start a business.
No, you can't. I was just very blessed. My wife is so supportive, and I know at first she was scared, as anyone should be. If you're going into this and you're not scared, there's something wrong with that. You should be scared, and my wife was definitely scared too. But I know about 6 months in, we were having a conversation, and I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this, and she's like, I'm not letting you quit. And I just had so much love and support from my family. But even if you don't have that, I think the one thing that's really amazing about Toronto and a lot of these neighboring areas, so I do a lot of my business or like networking in Toronto and in the KW area, Kitchener-Waterloo. And in both of those areas, between the chamber and other events that are just organized, you can meet so many great people who will be your support network because they're going through the same issues you are, and they're having the same concerns. I met so many people who are like, can we go for a coffee? You seem to have things together. Could you be my support, right? And I think it's just very blessed to be Canadian too, because we can, a lot of us are just willing to make that sacrifice for people, even if we don't know them. We're willing to sit down, have a coffee with them, and just be there for one another. Not saying other countries don't have that. There are great people everywhere. I've lived in some areas, some cities in the States where you couldn't find that support. And I found being here in Toronto, being in Cambridge and Kitchener, it was just so easy to find that support.
Interesting. Yeah, you need that support, especially when you're building. Toronto is a tech hub. Say as a Waterloo area, when you're building, even you're building tech industry, tech company or non-tech company, you need that support. Everybody's grinding, everybody's working hard, so you need that people around the same like-minded, so they can help you get to the next step. Wow. So let's talk about businesses. So where you see that you guys are heading in the, in the 2021 rest of the year or after, what's the plans, how long you guys, how big the expansion you guys are looking at, what's the scaling idea?
So I'm very much of the philosophy of like, don't bite off more than you can chew. I want to make sure that the customers we have, we can manage them and we can grow with them in Canada and the US. But I'm also very lucky that one of my core partners, he was like, there's no harm in expanding and just working harder to deal with the growth. So we have a good dynamic where I'm constantly saying, let's manage what we have. He's like, no, let's add more. And we go back and forth at that regularly. So through his encouragement, we ended up making an expansion into Europe. And the European market has been very enthusiastic about the game because it's an interesting dynamic in this industry where majority of the games are either coming out of the US or they're coming out of Japan. There's not so many games coming out from Canada. I think from my research, looking at, the 30 years of this industry, I have not seen another Canadian-based company that has been able to survive as long as we have in this industry. So Canada hasn't brought out a lot of games, and Europe hasn't brought out a lot of games. So when we met the European distributors, they're like, if you give us some additional, a little bit more attention, we'll double that outwards, because they just want someone to work with them and not ignore them like all our competitors have. So I'm very excited to see how that expansion goes. But the challenges with that is there's different laws and regulations in Europe, US, and Canada, and we didn't know that jumping into it. So what should have just been an easy turnaround has now become months of, okay, let's make sure we fight all the legal battles we need to fight now so that we don't get surprised by them in the future. So that's our big growth, is that this year we'll have 2 more product launches in Canada, US, Europe, and hopefully start having those deeper conversations with the Australian market as well.
Wouldn't you think that, with the characters you're designing, some of those, Japanese style or some of the Asian markets has a big, they value these characters much higher than the Canadian markets. Because I see a lot of animation shows with my daughter. She watches a lot of Japanese shows and Korean shows. They have a lot of fancy characters. Wouldn't you think that the comic world is much bigger in those markets?
It is, and I know when it comes to Asia Pacific, that area is going to be one of our big whales. If we can establish ourselves there, we're golden for the rest of the company's history. But at the same time, you want to be careful in every step you make, right? We haven't finished all of our legal battles in Europe. Why take on another workload when this is already consuming 100% of our attention, right? So even though this is, again, the back and forth I have with my partner, where he's like, no, let's take the next step. I'm like, no, let's deal with this. Let's make a deal. We'll finish this. Once we finish this, then we'll start executing on our strategy over there, right? And the other side to it, too, is if you can't survive in the markets you already have, you could just jump to a new market and try somewhere else and hope that you succeed there. But if you keep on doing that, you're never going to build the roots into the markets you currently have. And the roots are necessary. You can't just give up on a seed a few days in. You have to see where it goes. And I'm really grateful for that, because when we started in Ontario, I was literally just selling to any store I could drive to. So that was along the 401, any store along the 401, I would sell there. And then eventually we got our next step into Quebec. And then I started with 1 store in Quebec. Then we started to move to our second and did it 1 step at a time so that we can make our lessons learned. And when we do make mistakes, we're only making mistakes in front of 1 store or 2 stores, not 100 stores, right? So let's make our mistakes with, this is going to be published out there. So let's not say mistakes. Let's say our opportunities. Let's learn our opportunities now with Europe and US. And then when we get to Asia Pacific, we already have all those lessons learned. Right?
So what's the biggest challenge when you getting, it's like getting word out is a bigger challenge, or because people need to learn the game before they can start using it, right? So is the education piece is bigger, awareness is bigger, or is it simply selling is bigger? Where do you see the biggest challenges are, to get this the game across so people can enjoy it?
To be honest, there's so many areas that are at the same level that as you start deflating one, the other one starts growing. So once you get to a point that, okay, just say education is your hardest sector. We spend a lot of time then trying to educate all our players and stores and distributors about the game and the value add. But you're spending so much time on the education sector that sales starts inflating. And then all of a sudden that becomes your next beast that you need to handle. So I think the biggest ones are dissemination of knowledge. Like whenever we have new products, new updates we want to come to, the marketing side of it, that's definitely one beast that we need to tackle regularly. Sales is another. Sales is the lifeblood of every company. So, but now our sales process changed. We used to be direct from our warehouse to the retailers. Now we've actually put a distributor in the middle. So we have to respect that communication chain. And now when we talk to a retailer, we need to tell them to go buy from the distributor. And we need the distributor to trust us that we're not going to poach all of the retail stores and sell directly to them, because we'd get a much larger profit margin if we do that, but then we lose the distributor. And that's where the downside comes in. So sales is a big topic. And then community management. The thing is, like, when you have all these players, they're not isolated in little chunks. Like if I think about Apple, right? And they sell their product. When you own an Apple phone, you don't then have to join a community of people who have Apple phones to enjoy your product to its fullest. You can live in isolation. But for our game to thrive, we need to get all of those people who are playing it talking to each other and hyping each other up and encouraging each other and enjoying the game as a community. But the problem is, when you have that many people together, they don't always get along with each other. So now community management becomes a big issue. So there's all these different sectors that we're constantly balancing. And I'm really lucky right now that I have such a great team that they can handle their own monsters as they show up. And they let me focus more on just steering the ship, getting things going where we want it to go.
But I can see that from a communication standpoint, and how big challenge is that. Because when you're designing a characters or game, you thinking, your mindset is something else, right? So then you have to transform that or translate that from your mind to distributors, and the distributors gotta, understand that on the same level as you do, and then they gotta communicate that to the end users where they have to purchase a game. So between you designing it and then going through different channels, I'm not sure how much is that retained, what your intentions are, and how people perceive that end of the day, right?
Yeah, that's actually literally an issue I was dealing with all this morning, because we have a new product that's launching very soon, and we needed to send out that pre-order announcement telling all the stores, hey, you only have a few more days left to put in your pre-orders. So we sent that information to our, we have what they call a consolidator. They take your product and then distribute it to the distributors, who then distribute it to the retail stores. So I sent that newsletter to the consolidator. He sent it to the distributors, and then that was the end of the communication. It didn't go any further than that. And I was like, I had no idea what was happening. Why wasn't I getting any feedback? And then I started calling up the distributors one by one, realized they never got that newsletter. Or if they did, it went to the wrong person who just deleted it. So now I have to contact all the distributors, resend that newsletter 11 days later than I wanted to, and then make sure that it gets into the retailer's hands. So now I have to spot check with the retailers to see, hey, did you get that newsletter? And then, so there is constant communication, but this goes back to building that good foundation. I have such a good relationship with those retailers that most of the time when I call them, it's not like calling your client, it's calling your best friend that you haven't seen for a few weeks. And it's like, oh, how are the kids? How's the family doing? How did you deal with the heat wave? All those things. And it's like, okay, and by the way, did you get that newsletter, right?
Yeah.
So building those relationships, building that foundation is so key, because when you need to pivot your strategy or troubleshoot an issue, you have people who are going to give you honest feedback and get back to you in time. So, yeah.
I mean, we need the feedback, because that feedback's designed that drives the improvements in either in a game or in a company itself, right? Without the feedback, it's very hard. So where this your clients are buying the game currently? Is it all where do they go, Amazon or something? They buy it, or how do they get the games right now?
And so we are encouraging all people to buy through the local game store. So one thing that struggled a lot during COVID were these hobby stores that players used to come visit, play tournaments. They made a lot of their revenue off of entry fees for tournaments and commissions sold during tournaments. So chocolate bars, drinks, things like that. You can think that just like a movie theater. And then COVID hit, and over 50% of the revenue just kind of collapses under them because they can't have people in the store anymore. So the moment COVID hit, we reached out to all our retail stores and said, we are no longer selling directly to players. So we turned off our e-commerce site. And then two, we pulled all our product off of Amazon. And we now, whenever a player reaches out to us saying, we want to buy this product, we send them to our store locator and be like, here are all the retail stores nearby you that sell that product. Go purchase from them. Support your local retail stores. And then in turn, they're going to buy more product from the distributors who will buy more product from us. So it feeds that that engine while still supporting the people who really matter, the players and the local retail stores. Without them, this industry wouldn't exist. So we need to be in servitude to them.
So that's a different decision that you made that compared to a lot of other industries I know, because everybody jumped to Amazon, everybody went digitally, right? So you guys went totally against it. That, hey, listen, I need to support local stores where they can survive, because that that will enable you to survive. But I see a lot of other businesses, especially food restaurants, they all went digitally. They all start delivering their product and services digitally just to stay alive. But you guys took a totally different route to the same results.
Yeah. And I remember my mentor telling me that this was not a good idea, that I shouldn't be doing this. And it paid out in the long run because those retail stores, they survived. And now with our new product launching, they ordered way more inventory than I could have ever done online, right? Because at the other side of it is a lot of people know this about sales. A lot of your sales decision comes from people you trust, right? They're influencers.
Yeah.
One of the biggest influencers in our industry are store owners, because the players come into the store, say, hey, I'm interested in a new game. What do you recommend? And that's the first line of information gathering that a lot of these players get. So if we show a lot of love to those stores and they really enjoy our product, well, then now they're going to go turn around and share that love with their community. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing exponential growth because we prioritize the stores first.
Yeah,
I personally feel that we would have saw linear or stagnant growth if we stayed online and we didn't show love to the retail stores.
Yeah. That also probably leads back to what you just mentioned early on, that the loyalty that for coming from a client. You just transform that into stores. And when you show loyalty, definitely. You're gonna get that, reward back from a stores to you as well, right? For this business. Interesting. So, what's the next obstacle that you guys working on? Anything, on a character design, or what are you guys working on? What's the next hurdle that you gotta come over?
So there's two sides of it. One big hurdle is, like I mentioned before, the European distribution. That's just so much work, way more than I expected it to. But on the more creative side, so cool thing about this industry, I like to compare the difference between collectible card games and board games as the difference between movies and TV shows.
Okay.
Where movies, if you think of something like, Fight Club, it released, it's a masterpiece, it's on theaters, it goes to DVD, and that's it. There's no sequels to it, it just sits there. And sometimes you get movies like the Marvel movies, which has sequels, but that's more like a board game. If you think of Monopoly, it goes on to sell, it sells. There might be different editions, but at the end of the day, it's still just Monopoly.
Yeah.
Our game's more like a TV show. Every year, or more accurately in this industry, every 4 months, 3 to 4 months, you have to release an expansion. You have to constantly grow the game. So we're currently working on our next expansion, which will be coming out in Q4. And then we need to right away start planning our expansion for Q1 of next year. So it's constantly rolling for the next product and the next line of testing. And then also trying to figure out how are we going to stay on top of our competition and still be innovative along the way. So one thing that I love doing is how are we applying agile tech startup philosophies in an industry that's never done that before. So
does that follow the same software kind of, version 2.2, version 2, version 3, version 4 that you guys keep expanding and keep making changes to it?
Kind of, yeah. So we have our core platform, and each release you think of adding new features. So we're adding in these 130 cards. Well, you can consider this as a new major feature release. And then every few months, we got to add a new feature to keep people interested and engaged with the game on a regular basis.
So do they have to replace the current game completely, or they can buy some add-ons and just still play the same game, or they have to completely replace that, let the old game go and just get to the new game?
And so it is just an expansion. So they get to keep all of their previous product and expand to it. But the cool thing, like we were talking earlier about the value of Pokemon cards, it happens in all these games where the older stuff that's now out of print, it starts climbing in value. So you don't want to use the older stuff because the better condition they are, the more they'll be worth. So there's that double-edged sword of like, do I use my older stuff because it'll help me win games, or do I hold on to them for collector purposes? So I love hearing the players talk about that because that's not an issue I have to deal with. Interesting.
Very interesting. So where can people learn about this game, and where can they learn how to play, and where can they, eventually they have to find a distributor to buy it. But where can they learn about it, and how can they, be more interested in the game?
So all of our information about the game is on genesisbattleofchampions.com. It has everything you need about learning how to play, finding your local game stores, and everything like that. But at the same time, we're still on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and you just need to look up Genesis BOC, Battle of Champions. So Genesis BOC, and you'll find it on all of the social media platforms.
Oh, very interesting. And if somebody wants to connect with you, Assad, where can they find you, and where are you at? How do you respond to people?
Yeah, I'm on my email all the time. So Assad, ASSAD, at hauntedcastlegaming.com. And I love to hear from people. Like I know it's weird, but on the Genesis website, my email address and cell phone number are there. One day I'll have to have a separate work number and home number, but right now I get phone calls from random players all the time, and it's wonderful.
Interesting. Wow. Well, it sounds very interesting. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of scaling, a lot of growth in your way, and I think that there are many companies doing that. And kudos to you guys. You guys had a great success over the last few years. So good stuff. Thank you so much for your time. I learned so much about the game, but I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for your time, Assad.
And thank you for having me.
Have a good one.